Just like any team in all of the Big Four US sports leagues, the Utah Jazz have a loyal fan base that supports the franchise. There's just one problem. The team doesn't properly represent the region or the fans that they play for. That is why the Utah Jazz need a name change. The Jazz franchise was admitted into the NBA in 1974 as an expansion franchise called the New Orleans Jazz. The team was originally located in New Orleans, Louisiana, and was given the Jazz name because it honored the city's rich history of jazz music, as the style was created by people in the black communities of New Orleans. The team would play 5 seasons in the Big Easy and then go on to move to Salt Lake City, Utah before the start of the 1979-1980 NBA season. Team management tried to change the franchise's name, but there wasn't enough time to go through the league approval process before the season started, so the team would be known as the Utah Jazz from that point on. It is rumored that the NBA sent the team to Utah to basically die out because of a troubled financial situation and not much on-court success. After all, it is extremely expensive for the NBA to completely rebrand a team. As a result, the league didn't bother with changing the name, logo, or colors of the team, so for over 40 years, the team has been using the same New Orleans-inspired branding. Although there wasn't much early success, the Jazz really discovered their identity in the 1990s with coach Jerry Sloan and the dynamic duo of John Stockton and Karl Malone. Like any team, the Jazz have had winning and losing seasons, but that decade was a pivotal time for the franchise that was basically forgotten about 10 years prior. The team would also win in the 2000s with Deron Williams and Carlos Boozer, in the early 2010s with Al Jefferson and Paul Millsap, in the mid-2010s with Rudy Gobert and Gordon Hayward, in the late 2010s and early 2020s with Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and currently they're surprisingly having success while being led by Lauri Markkanen and Jordan Clarkson. However, it still makes no sense that to this day the franchise is called the Utah Jazz. The state of Utah and Salt Lake City are primarily inhabited by Mormons who are usually Caucasian, and we all know how white people do with rhythm, a key component in jazz music. It's not like the region even has a small jazz community. Jazz music and Salt Lake City, where the team plays, just doesn't go together. The team brand just simply doesn't represent the city, the state, or the people of the area, so a name change needs to happen. Some Jazz fans typically use the argument that because the team has been in Utah for over 40 years, it means the name can't be changed, but that isn't really an argument. A name change doesn't remove the history of the team, and all the achievements can still be retained with the change. So I compiled a list of potential names the Utah Jazz should be renamed to, going from my least favorite to my most favorite. At number 17, I have the Salt Lake City Saints, and it's a decent idea because Mormons who basically live in the Salt Lake City area and the Utah area are also referred to as Latter-day Saints. However, another professional sports team called the New Orleans Saints, conveniently, is actually also called the Saints, so I typically don't want the professional sports teams to kind of overlap names. Doesn't matter if it's overlapping in different sports. At number 16, I have the Utah Pumas, and it's basically just a large deadly cat, so it could be a decent name for a team, and also Pumas are native to Utah, so that could be a theoretical name for the Utah Jazz instead. At number 15, I have the Utah Mormons, and I think that's a pretty self-explanatory name. Utah has a large population of Mormons or people who have family members that are Mormon and people that believe in Mormonism, so that kind of makes sense and represents the people of Utah. At number 14, I have the Utah Miners, and that's because, like many other states in the West, like California, Alaska, Colorado, Utah had its own gold rush in the 1800s, so that represents some of the history of Utah. At number 13, I have the Utah Coyotes, and coyotes are a native animal to the region. However, it could cause some conflict because I believe the San Antonio Spurs mascot is a coyote, so that might be an issue, but nonetheless, it's a decent name for the Jazz. At number 12, I have the Utah Rattlesnakes, and rattlesnakes are pretty prominent in Utah. There's a lot of different species, so that could be a name for the team as well. At number 11, I have the Utah Mountain Lions, and mountain lion is just another name for a puma. It's the same type of cat, and it sounds slightly better than puma, so I have it a little bit higher up. At number 10, I have the Utah Cougars, Cougars is also just another name for Puma or Mountain Lion. However, I think it sounds better than those two, so I have it slightly higher, but still, it's a decent name for the basketball team in Utah. At number 9, I have the Utah Bighorns, and that's because bighorn sheep are animals that are native to the area. They live in the mountainous regions of Utah, so it represents the area pretty well, and not many other teams in the NBA have ram or goat or something inspired team names. At number 8, I have the Utah Gila Monsters, and they are the largest North American lizard, and they're native to the area, as well as venomous and just, in my opinion, very cool looking. It's pretty intimidating, especially because it has a monster in the name, and intimidation is kind of required for sports teams to have in their names, so that kind of applies. So I think it's a good potential name. At number 7, I have the Utah Yetis, and a Yeti is basically an ape-like creature that lives on snowy mountains, and the city of Salt Lake City is surrounded by snowy mountains. The Rockies go through Utah, so it makes sense in that regard, and Yetis obviously are pretty scary monsters, and I think the name could represent the city and the state quite well for the basketball team. At number 6, I have the Salt Lake City Elk, and that's because elk are the official state animal of Utah, so it represents the state quite well. Elk are just really big deer, so, they're pretty deadly as well. At number 5, I have the Utah Scorpions, and as many people know, scorpions are deadly animals, and they're also native to the region. They have, I think, venom or poison in their tails, so that's a legitimate name for the team. At number 4, I have the Salt Lake City Summit, and summit is typically what is referred to as the top of a mountain, the peak of it, so it's a decent name. I think it's cool, like that idea, and it's because Utah has a lot of snowy peaked mountains, and especially you can see it in the Salt Lake City skyline. Also, they could kind of bring back those 90s era uniforms with the purple and the mountains, and I know a lot of Utah Jazz fans like those uniforms, so that could also be a potential for the brand. At number 3, I have the Utah Pioneers, and pioneers were basically early explorers during westward expansion. Utah is one of those states that was explored. Some of them obviously settled in the area, but I think pioneers is a good term to be used for the Utah Jazz basketball team instead of the Jazz. At number 2, I have the Utah Salt Miners, and that's because there's a lot of salt mines in Utah and around the Salt Lake City area. Obviously, they have a huge salt lake there, so there's a lot of salt, and I think there can be a cool play on words that fans can use where when they lose to the salt miners, quote unquote, you can say that they're, the other teams are salty or something like that. There's some jokes you can make with that name if that name is picked. At number 1, I have the Utah Mountaineers, and mountaineers are basically a person or people that live in mountainous regions. They can also sometimes be called as mountain men, and they're typically isolated, rugged people, and they just live off the land and are really tough. So that's a good name for a men's basketball team in my opinion. So let me know your thoughts on any of these potential names, which ones you like, which ones you don't like. Make sure you like and subscribe, and just comment down below. So thank you for watching. I'm out. Peace.